I'm going to bring you along with me while I test out some different ways of priming my sealed piece of wood, or my sealed decoy, if you will, because I've had some issues with the paint not adhering, either coming off by easily being chipped or peeling off because a sticker was taped with some scotch tape onto the painted surface, so that when the scotch tape was removed, the paint came right along with it. I don't want that to happen ever again. So what I've done is prepared this scrap of wood. It's Tupelo. I sealed this surface and this surface because they were curved and had some character to them, and were also relatively smooth. So I sanded them, sealed them with about 3 or 4 coats of Deft polyurethane satin finish, and on each section I treated it a little bit differently. This is steel wool, which is exactly the way I did the palm frond canvas back drake. Here I've and I will be applying gesso to this surface. So in this section right here, I have lightly sanded it with 150 garnet paper, and done the same thing, yet I did it with 220, and I will be applying gesso like I would normally apply to the surface of the decoy, and we're going to use this for scratch testing and a few different things. Now what I've done for this last surface, which is divided into 3, is I've prepared it the same way. So we're going to try a few different things. What I have here are 2 different kinds of sponge that I believe I'm going to try on at least 2 of these areas. Products I'll be using will be the Traditions Texture Medium. I've never used it before. I've had it for many years. Got it from Willie. And to thin it, it's suggested that you use one of the mediums and I have the glazing medium, so I will use that. This also works really good for the last coat on top of your bills of ducks. Then I've got the Carbon Black Traditions paint, which I'm going to mix with this to come up with a nice gray. And I've got the Black Gesso, Liquitex Black Gesso, that I will be using on the gesso surface right here. That comes in white, comes in black. You can mix them together for any degree or shade of gray that you'd like, or even tint it with paint, like I'll be doing with the texturing medium. I'm going to want a gray, so I think I'd just try that this first time around. I've got some water here in a 2-sided salon hair tinting bowl that I like using, because I can have one that's clean water and one that I continually dip in that gets contaminated slowly, so it just leaves a nice clean side of water for me to use. So I'd like to try the get this gesso put on first, and I'll blow it dry, and we'll see which section is more durable, if any of them are going to be more durable. I use a brush for that, and usually doesn't take a whole lot of product. So my paint brush. You don't want to to thin down your gesso too much, because then it will bead up on the sealed surface, painted sealed surface, or sealed surface. It won't adhere the same way. So I'm trying to get a nice full load on my brush of pretty much the consistency that I know will adhere. Nothing more disappointing than having the paint peel off of the sealed surface of your bird. Very difficult to match that up. I drew pencil lines so I could see where things changed up as far as the way I treated the surface. The biggest surface I have here is the 220. You can see a little bit how it beads up if I use too much water. Sometimes it's going to take, a couple of coats, maybe even 3, to get a nice, even. I'm going to dip my brush here in the side that I used for dipping, just to keep it from drying out. It's dipped in water, and I'm going to blow this dryer. Okay. Apply another coat. It's important to, when painting in acrylics, especially when you're applying, solid base coats, to let the layers dry, or dry them like I just did with a blow dryer before you start applying more paint, because what happens is, where it's not dry, it won't stick and it comes off, leaving the areas that were dry to stay, and that small area that might not be dry, where I was concentrating the blow dryer on, you want to make sure everything is completely dry, because the wet brush will take the paint underneath, or the primer that's underneath, and remove it right down to the surface. So you don't want to waste your time having to go back, and then it would be an uneven surface. You want to have nice full coverage. Okay, well, I think that's dry enough for the purposes that we have. So I'm going to let it cool down, and perhaps I should do one more coat. I think I will. Pretty good chance I would have done 3 nice coats on a decoy anyway, so let's just go ahead and put a 3rd on. I'm going to blow dry this a little bit so that it's close to dry before or so that I can actually go straight to putting on the texturing medium, and that'll be interesting. Okay, there's a 3rd coat of the black Liquitex gesso. Now, for me, the easiest thing to do, so I don't have to keep getting up and getting new water all the time, even for my contaminated side, is I wipe out my brush in a paper towel before I rinse it out here. You don't have such a big amount of muddy water as you would otherwise. And I will be cleaning this brush up when I finish this test project more completely. But for now I just want to get some clean water. I'm not swishing, I'm just sucking up the clean water on the clean side of this bowl so that that brush isn't going to be too bad. Alright, I'm going to quick do final. So this is something to watch out for. See, that's a brush bristle, and that's taken me right down to it's usually more prominent with when you're sealing the bird that you have bristles. I'm using cheaper brushes when I'm applying the sealer, the Deft. Sometimes you'll have a high degree of brush bristles, like 2 or 3, I think is a lot, that actually come out of the brush when you're doing it, and you have to watch for that. Pull them out, and if you get to them soon enough, it shouldn't be an issue. You can just brush right over it again with a little bit more Deft. But if it's been sitting there for a little while and you peel it off, the best thing's probably to take the hair dryer and heat it up, and it couldn't smooth things out for you. So I'm going to use a different plate, and you're going to see me use texturing medium for the first time. And we'll see how this actually works. It's pretty thick. Squeeze a bit out. And tint that. Some of this carbon black. Shouldn't take too much. Oh, there it is. Erupting for me. Best to clean up something like that so you don't transfer to places you don't want. Say your face or part of your bird. I'm using my larger size palette knife. It's a nice dark gray, that's for certain. Now I could have played around on a plastic plate like this for the texture, but would it adhere to the plate the same way it would adhere to the sealed bird? And that's the questions that I'm going to be answering. It was suggested that I use a evenly textured sponge. So this is off of a piece of furniture foam, and I lost my other one. I blew it off with the blow dryer. And this is a natural sea sponge. It has some pretty consistent shapes to it, texture, and it's kind of contoured and will cover, you know, a large amount of space, so I think it might be pretty handy. I'm going to be using this one first, and I'm not sure if I should be doing it like a dry brush So I'm going to practice a little bit on the plate without dipping it in any water, just to see what happens. Oh. I like that a lot. Can do a nice light texture. And that was with no water. Let me try this. This is a stiffer sponge though. I'll give it a go, see what happens. Alright. It's a little bit larger. I'm still trying to decide, am I going to leave it completely smooth? Is this going to build up a stronger surface that won't nick and scratch or peel the same way just plain paint applied to the gesso on top of the Deft? You know, these are the questions that I'm answering with this test here. The way the gesso works is going to be interesting. I'm going to do some scratch testing here in a little while, but first let's I'm going to do a small area using this natural sponge. Coming straight up is going to be important so you don't have lines. That seems pretty cool. I'm going to do the next section with the furniture upholstery. I have something to compare it to. I'll be able to check durability, sandability if it needs to be sanded. I suppose you could come back with a couple different coats after the others dry, so I'm going to try some blow drying. I don't know if you can see the difference in the texture. And I think it's going to be important for me to quick rinse these out. I'll be right back. Okay, there was one other, I did 3 areas on this. This is the natural sponge, the furniture sponge, and then I'm going to use, and texturing medium, and I'm going to use gesso and the furniture sponge to see what kind of, if it's going to be much different in what it's like. You know, it's hard to know how it will be. So I want to squeeze out some moisture. I had to rinse these out. So that's almost dry now. Gesso is pretty thick, and it may be that I like that texture better. So we'll see. You can see that texture or not. And now I will need to rinse this again, and then I'm going to come back and dry it. Alright, got my sponges cleaned. You can see it is a considerably different texture with the gesso. It flattens out, but I actually kind of like it. So we'll see which is more durable and if I should be coming back and doing subsequent passes with the texturing medium or the gesso with the sponges. Well, I like the texture, and I think it's going to be prudent to just let all of this set up under the lights and get completely dried out before I start doing scratch tests and deciding if I like it or I don't like it. Okay, this has been sitting under the light and drying for quite some time now. I believe it's sufficiently dry and void of moisture. For review, I put plain gesso here on top of the sealed Deft polyurethane finish, and I sanded this section here with 220, this section here with 150, and this section with 4/0 steel wool, fine steel wool. So then on this surface I had steel wooled it with the 4/0 steel wool, fine steel wool. This is texturing medium applied with a natural sponge, providing a larger texture. The next one is the upholstery foam used for furniture, which provided a more even and smaller, finer texture. And I applied using the furniture upholstery foam, just straight gesso, black gesso. So I'm going to do some scratch testing here and just see what happens. This is what I've been having trouble with. You can see it's easily scratched. Okay, that's not so bad, the 150. The 220 is even better. Then I'm going to go with the, okay, that worked really well for the with just using the sponge and applying the gesso. And this is really extremely tough. Very hard to scratch. So I see a lot of advantage in applying even the gesso applied with the sponge is not as vulnerable as when it was applied with a brush. I really like the texturing paste. I don't like how this happened so easily. That's what was going on with the plus some paint on top of that. So, you know, they shouldn't be putting tape on painted surfaces. That's true, but perhaps if I had textured it like this or applied my gesso like this, that wouldn't have been such a big effect. In fact, I'm going to pull out some tape, scotch tape. This is about what was used on the palm frond. And let's just see what happens if I stick that on there. See what happened? Alright, let's try it on. This is a torture test. Recently trimmed my fingernails really short so I could shoot well at the range. I can't pick a thing up. Alright, come here. Again, same thing is happening. Paint's peeling off. So, since we have no control really what happens to our birds after they're put into registration, oftentimes they will use scotch tape to secure the little round sticker that says which division and your carver number and things like that. And again, not good. Now, let's give it a try on these surfaces. This is the gesso applied with a sponge. I could just grab it. That's encouraging. Then here we have the texturing paste with the upholstery foam, the fine stuff. It won't even hardly stick. So, even if I rub it really hard, coming up clean. Sponge application is the way to go. This has just been proven by this experiment. So, that's a pretty good test. And I won't be doing things like this anymore. That was my problem. The rougher the surface, the better the adhesion. Until you start applying it with the sponge. This is applied with a brush. This is applied with a sponge. And I think that that's key in all of this. So anyway, there we go.